How long should you keep your car before upgrading? That's next. I'm John Cadogan from AutoExpert.com.au, the place where Australian new car buyers save thousands off their next new cars. Hit me up on the website for that. This question was inspired by you, and I get asked variations on this theme all the time. This particular one comes from a guy named Colin, wondering how long you should keep a car for, even if it's still fulfilling its original purpose. Thanks to your advice, I bought a 2016 Hyundai Santa Fe Highlander. It's been great for getting around Sydney and living rurally, and it's got all the luxuries. It's done 60,000 kilometres, and I can see me keeping it for my teenage daughter to learn how to drive in 4 years' time. Should that play out, I could end up having this car for, say, 6 to 7 years and racking up 150 to 200,000 kilometres. Is that the cut-off point in general to then turn over a car? Or if it is still running well and is still quite modern, given all that you get with this car, should I look to have it for 10 years, say, as long as I keep up the maintenance? This is a really interesting question, and in some respects it's a bit, how long is that piece of string, okay? Like, where exactly is the end of the road? Is it a discrete point, and how variable is it? And even, well, I can see the end of the road down there some way, but when should I be the one getting off this particular ride? And I guess we all ask this about our cars from time to time. I note that for a lot of new car buyers, most, in fact, overwhelmingly, the term of ownership is kind of 3 to 5 years. Then the car gets turned over and sold to a second owner, and the new car buyer goes again. And these are the people who are being targeted, obviously, the new car buyers, by all of that advertising that you see incessantly online and on television. These people often finance the car, perhaps under a business name, and the finance rolls around every 3 to 5 years, and that seems like a good time to go again. These people generally have the budget for a car and they roll it over, and there's often a depreciation tax deduction as a bit of a bonus for doing that. That kind of thing rolls a lot of reasonably new but used cars into the used car market, and it gets a lot of second owners into reasonably safe, reasonably efficient late model used cars, which is generally a pretty good thing, provided you don't think too hard about the drain on the planet's resources. And this, of course, is just how car makers like it. They like that turnover, right? It gives the factories something to do. And it does tend to be quite expensive, though, and hard for many people to justify. Another class of new car buyer here is looking at the deal as a rather long-term affair, a car to see us out kind of thing, or a car to keep for 10 to 15 years. That's quite common too, at least among many of the inquiries I get. There's no doubt, okay, the longer you keep the car, the less severe the bite of its average annual depreciation, and the less the drain on the Earth's resources annually, because it does take quite a lot of raw materials and energy to make new cars, and reducing that is increasingly important to many new car buyers. The car industry really doesn't want you to focus on the fact that the greenest thing you can probably do on the personal transportation front is to keep the car you own right now for as long as possible without upgrading. They want you to spend shitloads and consume your way to a greener future, which is indefensibly absurd bullshit when you think about it, driven by marketing departments and swallowed only by scientifically illiterate consumers, albeit people with the best of environmental intentions. So if you're thinking of trading in your 3-year-old conventional car on that shiny new shitbox Tesla to start saving the planet, the greener option, frankly, would be to keep the car you own now for the next 7 to 10 years and drive it as efficiently as possible the whole time. You're welcome. Look, everyone in a Tesla is a green evangelizing nut job striving for status, right? That's the primary driver of their ownership decision. It's not saving the planet. That is indefensible. And not coincidentally, This bullshit message about saving the planet by buying whatever green car is the only way car makers can pump up the returns for their shareholders. They're greenwashing, one of the filthiest aspects of the business, which is the inherent supply side environmental filth of building new cars. So there's that. On the flip side of this whole equation, right, the longer you keep your current car, the more shit and more out of date it becomes. It will not be as safe as the latest cars, and nor will it have the latest features. For example, a well-maintained car at the end of its life right now probably will have airbags and maybe stability control, but it won't have auto emergency braking, LED headlamps, direct injection, or Android Auto. And all of these things are real reasons to upgrade to a new car. The other consideration, right, it's purely financial. All other considerations aside, it's just nice to have a new car. Just like it's nice to get a new kitchen or wear new clothes or live in a new house, whatever. Whether or not you can afford it is another matter entirely. If you can afford it, getting a new car every couple of years is actually a pretty nice way to roll. And the car industry does kind of specialise in selling people cars they don't really need at prices they can't really afford in pursuit of status. That's where you attempt to pump up other people's perception of you by acquiring cool products and being seen in or with them, even though the unfortunate reality is that most people still won't give a shit about you irrespective of the car you drive or the suit you wear or the suburb in which you live. If you are a shallow vein posturing prat in a cool car, the cool car really doesn't turn things around for you at a fundamental level. And this becomes apparent pretty quickly to everyone you inflict yourself upon. So there's that. The longevity of a car also has a great deal to do with how you treat it while you own it. Do you get it serviced on time, right? Do you drive it with mechanical sympathy? Do you treat it gently? If you answer yes ×3 to these questions, then your car is far more likely to live to a ripe old age. But if you drive it like you stole it, if you nudge it into drive while you are still rolling backwards every time, if you touch park every curb, if you drive hard after every cold start and treat the servicing schedule as if it is just, guidelines, then your car is going to die prematurely. Corrosive environments are a factor too. Living by the ocean or in regions where they salt the roads in winter is definitely an automotive end-of-life accelerant. High mileage cars tend to last for a lot of miles because the frequency of cold starts is reduced, okay? But they tend to expire early in terms of the years that they have been on Earth because they move a long way every year. And low mileage cars, vice versa. So there's that to consider as well. So the term lifespan is either years or distance, and they relate to how the car has been used. For most cars, making a generalisation here, they're kind of looking pretty shaky after the 200,000 kilometre ballpark, I'd suggest. And maybe that's not quite the end of the road, but you can certainly sniff it from there. And somewhere on the road to 300,000 or something, there's likely going to be a hiccup. 250,000, that's pretty much the time for a do not resuscitate order on many cars. And I know I'm going to get a lot of comments to the effect that, hey, I've had this Camry or whatever, Hilux, Land Cruiser. It's done 500,000 kilometres and it's still going strong, so you're full of shit, mate. Bring it on. Congratulations if that's you. But your experience is an outlier statistically. 200,000 Ks is about 13 years of normal driving in Australia. If we rounded it up to 15 years, which would be 230,000 kilometres of average driving, that would pretty much do it for most cars. They would be fully qualified shit heaps by then, with a PhD in shit heapery. Look at it like this, okay? You buy a Corolla, a Mazda 3, maybe an i30 for 25 grand, and say it lasts you for 15 years. That car has cost you $4.57 a day in depreciation. And that's if it's worth absolutely nothing at the 15-year mark, a complete throwaway. That's really not a great deal to pay, I'd suggest, for more mobility than a Roman emperor, which is exactly what that car has given you. It's just not. Basically, it's like this. The second law of thermodynamics is going to kill every car eventually. The probability of a major component failure increases with time, even if proper maintenance is done. And at the same time, the value of the car keeps dropping. Eventually, you get to a point where a major component fails, like an engine or the auto transmission, and the repair is going to cost more than the vehicle is worth, and then it simply does not make economic sense to proceed. And I guess the unkind thing about major repairs here is that while the value of the car keeps heading south in the time domain, the cost of repairs tends to be indexed to the cost of living, partly because your mechanic needs to keep paying the rent and, of course, feeding his family. When a car dies like this, it's generally unexpected and it can seem quite unfair and even be very emotional for some people. Sometimes people keep cars until they die because they object philosophically to pumping up car maker profits, or they don't acknowledge that the depreciation you pay is really a trade-off for tangible value, like extra tangible value. Like you buy a car and it is tangibly better than a 10-year-old car. And if that's you and you don't see that as tangible value, then hey, it's a free country. Fair enough. It's not me, however. I mean, I've owned 8 new cars and I paid the full freight for all of them. And the upgrades were always worth it to me, even though my basic problem with new cars is I'm always driving someone else's new car, like evaluating a car maker's test car, which typically get handed out for a week at a time. So my cars hardly ever get driven. They're actually really good buys for the second owner, so there's that. But then, of course, I also get the crackpot, right? The guy who expects his vehicle to last forever. This is somewhat unreasonable, I'd suggest. They get very indignant and indignant too when this doesn't happen. The car doesn't last forever. It lets them down in a big way. Like the engine has gone poopy in its trousers and my car has gone only, quote unquote, 300,000 kilometres. This is a known issue, apparently. In this situation, right, I am moved to ask these people what they think an acceptable lifespan would actually be. 300,000 Ks is like 7.5 laps of the planet, which to me is amazing durability for a vehicle that maybe only cost 20 grand or something. In Colin's case above, I don't categorise him as a nut, quite the opposite. But I do think his arithmetic is a little bit off. See, he's done 20,000 kilometres times 3 years, that's 60,000 Ks in total. And if he drives the same for another 4 years, that'll be another 80,000 for a total of 140,000 Ks, at which point teenage daughter straps on the L plates and starts her driving journey, right? Which frankly to me sounds like a really solid plan. Big tick of approval from me, like that matters. So, at 140,000 Ks, Colin's daughter will be in a 7-year-old car. It's still going to be reasonably current in terms of technology, which is good. It's going to be safe and efficient and loaded with contemporary features, blah, blah, blah. Kind of a good car for a kid to learn in, I'd suggest, and a good second car for many families. And it'd have at least 4 or 5 years of 15,000 Ks a year of daughter driving left in it. It's unlikely that a teenage daughter is going to drive more than that, I'd suggest. And big plus, instead of purchasing a used car for the daughter with an unknown history, he knows the Santa Fe like the back of his hand because he's had it the whole time since it rolled out of the showroom floor. It's been maintained well, and one hopes it hasn't been crashed or thrashed or otherwise abused, so it's ideal for this purpose. And it's pretty hard to know that stuff about any used car you'd buy for your kid to learn on, no matter how diligently you attempt to investigate that prior to purchasing it. So, when to upgrade? Not straightforward, I'd suggest, and it depends a lot on you and your priorities. So I hope this report has given you some overall perspective from which to make a choice that's right for you.